Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. They longed for freedom. They longed to live a life of their own. They wanted to venture out on their own and make their way in the world. Unfortunately, each of these pigs saw the world a little bit differently. They wanted to do things their own way. Because of this, these 3 little pigs didn't always get along. The first pig went off from his parents' home and built his own house out of straw. The second pig went a little bit further down the road into a different place, a different land, and built his house out of sticks. The third pig went further into the world to establish his own self, and he built his house out of bricks. Now, you are familiar with this story. You know how this story works. But the reason I tell you this story is because we continue our Series 66 by looking at Obadiah. Obadiah, first of all, is a great name for a book, or maybe for a future child or grandchild. Obadiah. It just rolls off the tongue. But Obadiah is actually the shortest book in all of the Bible. It's 1 chapter and only 21 verses long. And in this book, it talks about the Edomites. Now, for you and I, that name doesn't sound very familiar. But if we dig a little deeper, we find that the Edomites are actually a group of people that would have been very familiar to us. Not so much their people and their history, but certainly their founder, their forefather, the one whose name they are named after. In order to learn this, we have to go further back into the Bible, into the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, we hear the story of 2 brothers. Not 3, like my opening story, but 2 brothers, Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau's name literally means hairy and grabby. Esau, of course, is the hairy one. He is the one who would become the hunter. And Jacob is known as grabby. And we learn in their story that as they grow, Jacob and Esau were fighting for their father's attention. Now, in our everyday life and everyday world, this sibling rivalry seems to make sense. Anyone who has a brother or a sister, either older or younger, will become familiar and understand that it is natural to have some rivalry between siblings. Even in the best of families, it is often said, "Mom likes you best," or something like that. Because we all compare ourselves to our siblings and to our perceived wrongs by our parents or by the rest of our family. We place ourselves in a bad spot. Now, the reason this is important in understanding the book of Obadiah is that way back in the Jacob and Esau story, Esau was meant to have the birthright or the blessing of his father. However, he sells his birthright for a simple bowl of lentil stew. And so Jacob receives the blessing and then becomes the patriarch that would carry on the name of Israel. And Esau goes out on his own and makes his own life. And eventually, Jacob becomes known as Israel, and the line of his family becomes the Israelites. Esau becomes known as Edom, and his line is the Edomites. Now, fast forward a number of years, and the Israelites are in a negative and bad circumstance. The Israelites are being taken over by the Babylonians. We've heard this story many times as we've looked at the Old Testament because it is a major theme throughout, knowing that the Israelites are under captivity because of their going against God. Other foreign countries have come in and taken them away. During the Babylonian invasion and ultimately exile, the Edomites literally lived in the hills over the people of Israel. They were separated, living in their own places, and they watched, and some of them even participated in the downfall of Israel. And so in Obadiah, we hear a call against that, a call that says that these Edomites were wrong to watch Israel fall and fail, that after all, they were part of the same family, and they should have not rejoiced in that. Obadiah, verse 12, "You should not look down on your brother in the day of his misfortune." Well, of course, this can be said of us today too. Not just our physical brothers, our family by biology, but certainly those whom we see as less than our best friends. We shouldn't look down on the misfortune and the calamity of others, because we too could be in a position at some point of falling and failing away. So the book of Obadiah is a treatise against the Edomites, against those who would stand by and let Israel fall and fail. Of course, this could be spoken in today's world as well. Not just looking at the nation of Israel and the way we would support or encourage them as Americans, as Christians, and there's a lot of history and politics that go around that. But how it is that we support one another as human beings. How it is that we identify the enemies that are real and present and dangerous. Certainly those enemies sometimes are other people that seek to destroy us, to seek to destroy our way of life and our understanding and how it is that we can flourish as human beings. But more often than not, those enemies are psychological, spiritual. Those enemies are the things that would take us astray, that would lead us to jealousy, envy, and hate. These things that are not of God, these things that would seek to get away from our life. The latter part of Obadiah is not necessarily a call against Edom and their lack of work towards their siblings, but it is a call to be aware of the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is a theme throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament some, that illustrates that God will work. On the day of the Lord, that God will make all things the way He intends them to be. The day of the Lord sometimes is a scary thought, a scary moment, that God would come and show judgment upon you, upon me, and upon our nation, and upon our world. But in that judgment, for Christians, our hope is that we have faith and hope in Christ, that it is Christ that makes us right with God. But when Obadiah speaks of the day of the Lord, he's transitioning from Edom's sin and making sure that we understand that it's not just Edom that has fallen, that is subject to pride and to envy and hate, but that we all are. And these are things that are not of God and things that God would help and hope that we would eliminate from our life and see others as equal, others as in need of God's grace and God's grace available to all of them. So it's my hope that someday you will crack open this book, read the 21 verses, and reflect upon what God would have to say to you in this book of the prophet Obadiah. I hope this helps you today, and I hope that you connect with one of your siblings, whether it be biological or in the church, so that you can build each other up and be one as God would intend. God bless you, and have a great day.